We've worked our whole lives, saved and invested just to achieve financial freedom, and been led to believe that instead of painting the perfect financial picture, everyone's plan is the same. But the truth is, no one is like you, and you deserve a financial strategy just as unique as you are. How do you navigate the complexities and volatility of a financial environment that just never sits still? And how do you find the guidance you need? Who do you trust with the wisdom to paint your financial masterpiece? You've arrived. This is the Wealth Council. Thanks so much for joining us on the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson. Timing, they say, is everything. Such is the case with retirement as well. As a matter of fact, in moving into retirement and trying to figure out Social Security, it can be much more difficult for couples to actually figure that out together. So, in this segment, we're going to talk about guiding couples through Social Security and joint retirement investments with independent advisors from around the country, including Greg and Kristen Taylor out of Ohio and out of Tennessee, Gary Thurman. Folks, it's always nice to have you with us. Appreciate you joining us.
Good to see you.
Good to see you.
I want to talk about, Gary, why this is so complicated. Look, marriage is complicated. We know that to begin with, but when we go into Social Security and try to combine that and time it up, why does it become so complicated for couples?
I think they have to be on the same page, right? Couples have to be on the same page. And it's something I think so important is to have those weekly meetings, to have those yearly meetings, to talk about what your goals are, your income goals, your debt goals, your tax goals, all these different things. And it was fascinating when I saw this show because I thought about there's a marriage every 16 seconds in the United States of America, Greg. That's over 2 million a year. But here's what's sad. 50% of those marriages end in a divorce because of what? Money.
Money. Financial issues.
The main reason.
It's huge. And you got to be on the same page. And I think that's one of the biggest weaknesses. That's what it makes it so difficult. And my personal opinion is you and your spouse or your significant other need to be on the same page. And you need to talk.
Well, yeah, and as you talk through financial things in your marriage, I think it changes. It kind of turns into this living, breathing organism throughout your marriage, right? Early on, you're saving, you're rearing kids, you're talking about putting money away for their college. And then as you move towards retirement, your financial goals need to move with that too. And I think you really start, I like what you said, how you have state of the union type of addresses.
Meetings.
Right, yeah, state of the family. Sometimes I'll go to Greg and I'll say, okay, this is where we stand with everything. And I do think that's important because then that opens up the conversations and the communication lines to be able to start figuring out what you agree on and what you don't agree on.
You talked about timing on this, and I'm sorry, the eyes rolled in the back of my head when you said weekly meetings on Social Security or something like. Look, communication, I understand, between couples becomes paramount at this point, especially when we're talking about finance. But in the communication stance, if you don't understand, Greg, the Social Security system, doesn't it become more complicated and maybe it just becomes a fight?
The key here, Brad, is that we understand where we're trying to get to, the goal. Because one person might be very aggressive about their stance on how they work their money and how they view life and retirement in general. Another spouse may be very, very cautious. So understanding, should I take Social Security as soon as I turn 62? Should I wait? Should I try to maximize it at age 70? And there can be different viewpoints on that. So having an actual plan in place that sets aside and says, okay, we're going to have this amount for Social Security, we're going to turn it on at this age, and we're going to take this much risk with our other investments so we can grow it over time, understanding what that looks like and making sure that the husband and the wife both agree, even on how much money they need to spend in retirement.
Well, and I think Social Security, you were pointing that out several times there. I think understanding that that's just a piece of the overall puzzle.
That's right.
You know, as Gary was pointing out about the conversations couples have that unfortunately sometimes end in divorce with finances, that's just a piece of it. So what's important to you may not be what's important to me, right?
That's the
you
goals.
may be focused on Social Security because that's our guaranteed income in retirement, right? But I may be thinking bigger than that, thinking, okay, that's just a piece of the puzzle. What are we going to do with this other chunk of money in our 401k or in our investments? What are we going to do about that? That's important to me. So understanding those things is important.
And understand how Social Security works. You know, if you do the stats, if you turn Social Security on at 62, you know, versus turning it on at 70, if you wait until 70 to get that extra money, it's going to take you till 79 to make up the difference of the money you didn't get at 62. But I do think every couple is going to be different. Maybe one of you have a much higher Social Security than the other. So maybe we turn that one on first. You just got to communicate. It all comes down to communication to me.
Well, here's the maximization. You can maximize it if you what? If you live that long.
That's correct.
And you don't have that guarantee. I've seen the recent numbers that are out that 1 out of every 4 households right now are depending on Social Security for 90% of their income in retirement. And it's not working. How much as an independent advisor, all of you, are you seeing people come in that they've had advisors before fail to talk to them about working this piece of the puzzle in?
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand when we read those articles, sometimes, you know, those people watching today might think, okay, well, I have plenty of money. That's not really what I'm focused on. But it is an important piece. As a woman, I would say it's a different mindset. A lot of women we meet with are more focused on that security piece. So they're looking at their only income as being Social Security. So even if they're okay, let's say they have $1 million saved, they're still focused. Their mindset is that Social Security is their income. So understanding that you can turn your nest egg into an income source to supplement that Social Security is an important conversation I think you should have.
Yeah, and Social Security was designed, what? To help us cover the essential bills.
Right.
That's what it really was designed for.
It really was.
Not to cover everything in life, you know, but it's usually the second largest income source you have in retirement. So being on the same page with your spouse, it's just vital.
And what do we do with the rest? Because as you mentioned, we can turn part of it into an income stream. But, you know, I think about families where one spouse wants to take a lot of risk with those other dollars. The other spouse is scared to death. So when you can organize an income plan that lets the cautious spouse understand that they're going to have income to take care of all their needs and they're not going to outlive that income, that really gives the other one permission to go ahead and take more risks with the other investments.
Yeah, Social Security is kind of a security blanket, if you will, for income. I mean, it's extra income coming in. You earned it. You put money back all these years. You know, everybody wants their Social Security. But when you turn it on, it's a very important decision, especially as a married couple.
And that's the blanket on top of the plan that all comes together as one. It's a holistic plan that is a guide. And if you're walking a trail where the next step could mean everything, wouldn't you want a guide? That's what the Wealth Council is. So let's put together a plan for you that includes Social Security optimization. Call the number on your screen right now or click the QR code. You haven't done this before, so why wouldn't you want a guide? It's the Council's wisdom, but it's your wealth. We'll be right back.
For your free Social Security maximization guide from the Wealth Council, call 844-463-3466. Taking part in getting the most from your Social Security with this guide costs you nothing. Not taking part can cost you and your spouse a lot. Discover strategies that fit your unique situation and help you make the most of every dollar. Call for your free Social Security maximization guide from the Wealth Council, 844-463-3466, or scan the QR code below from your smartphone camera.
Welcome back to the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson. Let's talk about advisors and whether or not you actually need one or whether do-it-yourself is good enough. As a matter of fact, 38% of Americans have an advisor. The rest don't. I've got a couple of advisors with me who are independent advisors who have an idea about some of this. Ben Fuchs out of Connecticut, Stuart Willis out of Colorado, Arizona, Nevada, Oregon, and places far beyond. Stuart, you always exhaust me with all of this. I want to do a Vanguard study, gentlemen, that recently came out. $500,000 given to do-it-yourselfers. Over a 25-year period, they made $1.7 million. You've given it to an advisor. This is on a Vanguard study. They create $3.4 million over that 25-year period. So doubling what do-it-yourselfers do. Why, Stuart?
Number one, we've had a tremendous run in the markets, and it gave people a false sense of competence, to be fair. And look, a blind chicken could have made money in the stock market from 2009 to 2021. But here's the thing. I think that oftentimes you have to understand there's tons of emotions that come into it when you invest. People know you're supposed to buy low and sell high, but oftentimes they do the opposite because there's two main emotions that guide you when you invest. There's fear and there's greed. And that's what happens. Sometimes people take too much risk and then they end up selling when they're low and they never jump back into the market on time.
If boomers are the ones who hold most of them, and boomers are statistically the ones who will have advisors, we've gotten old. We're into that stage where we go, you know what, maybe I don't know what I don't know. Advisors can actually do something better than do-it-yourselfers because of maybe perspective.
All that we do in our firm is focus on people who are retiring, who need that money to rely on and live on in retirement. So it's a different perspective. And as people get closer and closer to retirement, to relying on that money, it makes sense why they would be more comfortable with an advisor. I remember in 2014, I worked with a guy, at that time, yields were awful. But what ended up happening is we put him in this dividend portfolio where he was getting 4.5%, 5%, which at the time was wonderful. And he's an engineer, so he thought, hey, I can do this myself. Let me figure it out. I got this. And so he decided, I'll take this back. He started looking at these stocks with the highest dividend yields. And even though you said a blind chicken couldn't find, or whatever blind squirrel can find the nut, this guy couldn't. I checked on him a year after he took his portfolio over because he was trying to buy stocks with 9%, 10% dividends. He felt that was the only thing to go. He was down over 70%. He had lost over 70% of his money.
You can't recover from 70%.
Can't, especially not at his age when he needed to rely on that money more.
When Ben talks about engineers, my experience has actually been something different, right? I think engineers to me are just need something proven to them, right? They're facts-driven people. We have clients that work at Lockheed, Boeing, they're avionics engineers, and they realize, if you can rationalize with them, and they realize, look, their expertise extends only to the end of their expertise, right? An avionics guy isn't going to go try to, work on a propulsion system. And so if you can limit their expertise and make them understand that there's knowledge they don't have that they'll benefit from, which includes the ability to diversify, then I think they can start to understand.
Is there something about leadership, CEOs, because within this study you have that, more of the wealthy people will move towards advisors?
I think one of the things that I've found with business owners that don't do well versus the ones that do well, the ones that don't do well try to do everything themselves and try to control every piece. The ones that do better are the ones that are comfortable delegating and moving, finding experts to do the things that they can do better.
Is there something about cost that overrides this for everyone? A misnomer in their brain?
Yes. Oftentimes people are penny wise and pound foolish, and they're not seeing the benefits of the additional advice. And I think it's a big mistake.
All right. Don't make the big mistake. Maybe you're a do-it-yourselfer. Maybe you already have an advisor who says it doesn't do well for me, and maybe it's time for a second opinion. There's an impact on this. There's studies that are done on this. The thing is that you're not like anybody else. So maybe you need to reach out to an advisor who can help put together a plan that saves more money for you in your retirement. Call the number on your screen, click the QR code, let an independent advisor help. It's never too late for a second opinion. Wealth Counsel returns after this.
What is the difference between an independent financial advisory firm and a financial advisor that represents a big box corporation? A corporate advisor will often use tools and products designed for and by that corporation. So when you as an investor ask them about a strategy that would work for you, they generally would offer you solutions from that corporation. An independent financial advisory firm typically provides financial advice without the same constraints faced by many of the big box firms. Because they aren't required to suggest specific financial products or companies, they often have the flexibility to provide objective and unbiased recommendations tailored to the unique financial goals and circumstances of their clients. So the one question to ask yourself is, are you corporate or are you independent? Call the Wealth Counsel at 844-463-3466 for your own no-cost tailored plan with an independent financial advisor. That's 844-463-3466 to meet with an independent financial advisor of the Wealth Counsel.
Welcome back to the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson with Advisor Spotlight, Derek Holton out of Oklahoma. Derek, nice to have you with us. I want to go back to what kind of got you into this business. My understanding is there's quite a story to that.
Well, I had some formative experiences, Brad, as a young man. I find humor in them now as I look back, but when I was in 7th grade, I made the fateful decision to play the trombone. And so back then you rented these instruments,
Sure,
or at least my
did.
parents did. There were 6 kids. We didn't have any extra money, right? So they rented a trombone that barely worked, and the case was in shambles. And of course I would go to band, and I would be playing trombone next to these guys that had the shiny new, the state of the art, whatever. And I was really embarrassed. And so, I don't know, all these experiences have to do with money for some reason, but fast forward, or have to do with music for some reason, but fast forward, and in high school, we were supposed to wear a black formal outfit to a concert. Well, I was the only one that wore navy blue because my mom couldn't afford a black one, and she shopped at Goodwill and she found a navy blue one.
It's close enough.
Well, yeah, except I was embarrassed.
Yeah.
But I made the decision that I don't want to be poor. Okay, I don't want to be poor. I decided that as a very young man. A little bit later on, I watched as my in-laws really fumbled with their nest egg. They didn't really have much of a nest egg to start with. They were poor money managers. They were in debt. They didn't have a plan. They didn't have a trust. They didn't have any of those things. They didn't have an advisor. They had no one to tell them. So it was, in a lot of ways, not their fault. But when they died, they had 5 kids. When they died, there was not a lot of money in the first place. But without a trust, what happened, as you well know, that money goes into probate.
Yeah.
And the probate lasted 6 years. 6 years. And they didn't have much money. Well, guess what? What happened to most of that money?
Went to the lawyers.
It went to the lawyers. It didn't go to the kids. The kids could have some of those kids, my wife's siblings are, they're struggling a lot financially, and they could have really used that money.
And this directed you to, I want to help other people.
I want to help. I don't want other people to go through this same thing. I don't want them to be poor. I don't want to be poor. I don't want them to be poor. And I want to see them have a plan so things work out a little bit better for them than they did for my in-laws and than they did for my wife's siblings.
And time after time, you continue to change people's lives with what you do. So the full circle moments are pretty rewarding.
Very rewarding, and God has blessed us greatly, and we have wonderful clients that we love and do our best to serve.
We're glad you're with us on the Wealth Council.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Brad.
Derek. Thank you for being with us. The Wealth Council continues after this.
Think of how much you've saved in your 401k, 403b, or TSP retirement accounts, okay? You have that number? Great. Now, subtract 20 to 30% from that number for taxes. That's how much you actually have saved. Call the Wealth Council at 844-463-3466 right now for your free retirement tax guide. Your 2024 tax guide is free for the viewers of the Wealth Council, so call now, 844-463-3466, or scan the QR code below from your smartphone camera.
Welcome back to the Wealth Council. I'm Brad Johansson. Are you safe, or are you sorry you were safe? Well, back in 2023, there were some problems playing it safe. Let's talk about the cash conundrum with independent advisors from around the country. Brittany Hagy out of Tennessee, and out of the Gulf Coast, based in Biloxi, Mississippi, Paul Roberts. Nice to have you with us. Let's talk about safe and sorry. In 2023, Brittany, S&P went up 26%. NASDAQ went up 55%. A lot of people in 2023 were a little worried about a recession. I'm going to play it safe and go in cash. And if you were in cash, you got 5%, and you were going, what the heck? I was trying to play it safe. Do I need to rethink how playing it safe works now with my money?
Yeah, this is really interesting because many folks forget that every type of investment has some kind of risk. And you get to choose the risk. You as the investor gets to choose how much risk, when that you take the risk, the quantity of the risk, but you cannot control things like the markets. But be intentional in how you choose that risk. Inflationary risk is what we have when we're looking at cash. Purchasing power is lost because inflation is continuing to go up, which means the value of our dollar is decreasing, and so it takes more money to buy what we usually buy. And so we have to make more with less. And so we have to protect from that risk.
Creating a diverse plan. Paul, I know you have a very personal story on how cash played into what you did in 2023.
We do. I do, very much. But also on Brittany's, just to follow up with that, you know, inflation, also taxation. People were hit with a lot of taxation that they were unaware of. They moved to cash accounts, money markets, things of this nature. And then instead of being in a capital gains taxable position, they moved themselves into a position where those gains were taxed as ordinary income. So they ended up at a higher rate. And so that took away a lot of the gains too. You know, people don't always compensate. They see the return, but what is your real in the pocket return, right? How many dollars were put in your pocket? Well, that's calculated after taxes, right? So
well, when I talk about what you were doing in 2023, you ended up having to start a new office that had to be based pretty much in cash?
Correct. It was, you know, one of the reasons we tell people you have to build a plan, right, that can weather any storm, that can see through all markets, that can work its way through markets, because you never want to be in the position of trying to time the market, right, and trying to go into cash, okay? It's a losing game. Unfortunately, I understand that situation. You also have investment risk, right? When do you reinvest? When do you get back into the market? Well, in 2020, the latter end of 2022, I purchased some new financial firms. We've been acquiring new firms, and the firm I acquired, the advisors had moved all the clients completely to cash in 2022 down in the bad market. So I was faced myself with the reinvestment risk and when and where and how do I re-enter markets. And I don't know if you remember, but 2023, the synopsis was completely diversified out there. Half of Wall Street was saying we're going to see a 30% downside this year. Half of Wall Street was saying we're seeing a 30% upside. When all of the professionals and the experts are completely divided, I was in a position of which side is right, when do I re-enter? And it's a place that I just hope our viewers understand you never want to put yourself in that position.
I want to talk about logic on this, because logic says playing it safe means that I don't get too aggressive. That may be a misnomer, Brittany?
Well, we can't just consider the logic, because our dollars do hold some emotional component to them.
Sure.
They have that emotional component, and we have to ensure that we are not being driven by fear. And I get it. I mean, people moved so much to cash recently. I mean, I've sat down with quite a few folks recently who have large sums of money just sitting in cash, and we talk through, well, why is that? Well, you know, do you have a purpose for this? Walk me through it. And it's fear. I don't know where to put it. I'm afraid to lose. So there's strategies you can put into place to minimize that loss, but also ensure diversification is occurring. Because if diversification is occurring, that's one way to really counteract the impact of inflation and ensuring that not everything's eaten by the increase in prices.
My guess is you're going to tell me a plan is probably the biggest lesson you got out of what you did through 2022 and 2023.
Yes, definitely. A plan, well, and it's not just a plan, just to support what Brittany was saying about people's fear. I think a lot of people have fear, but it's because of their previous experiences in the industry.
Right.
You know, if they're dealing with the large, what we call big box brokerage firms that are charging them a fee, and how much actual active and tactical and strategic management is really going on in that portfolio, or how much fee collection and rebalancing is going on. You know, when you work with a fiduciary firm like ours, where we are actively, strategically, and tactically managing assets in our portfolios, it's a whole different world. And so I think that people have a fear because they've had that in the past.
Yeah, no question, thank you. I'm wondering whether you're in a cash conundrum, wondering whether or not you've played it safe and now you're sorry, wondering whether or not you've visited an advisor who hasn't gone through any of this with you. They just say, sit tight, it'll be okay. maybe it's time for a second opinion. Come in for a Wealth Counsel plan that's individual to you, that makes you safe and happy, not sorry. Call the number on your screen, click the QR code. Let's put a plan together for you so there is no more conundrum. And the Wealth Counsel continues after this.
Are you preparing to make your retirement funds work for you while not taking too much risk? While there is no substitute for sitting down with an independent financial advisor, why don't you learn the strategies of investing as well? Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Counsel right now to learn about investment strategies that align with your goals. Call for your free retirement investing guide from the Wealth Counsel right now. 844-463-3466. That's 844-463-3466.
So many of you watching have had experience with advisors that may not have touched on a lot of the topics we covered today, and why not? Well, maybe they can't. Or maybe you haven't been treated like your retirement matters as much as someone's with a bigger number. Or maybe you've been trying to do this yourself and you could use some help. Well, at the Wealth Counsel, we're not all about numbers, we're about relationships and helping create dream retirements, one person at a time. Maybe it's time for a second opinion. Call or click the QR code right now. Reach out to someone you can trust. As always, we thank you for joining us. I'm Brad Johansson, and until next time, it's the Counsel's wisdom. It's your wealth.